pass it on to somebody else. So hopefully I don't want to take too much of your time, but I thought it was important that we at least touch base and talk about a few things before the season started. I sent you an agenda just a few minutes ago, just kind of outlining what I want to talk about today. Most of it is not going to be rules. It's not rules related, but more of protocol and where we're at, where we've been, and so forth. So I want to start off by thanking everybody for continuing with life as normal as we can, and agreeing to still be officials in these times. We are right now, we're about 23 or 24% down in wrestling official registrations, which is a little bit of a concern. Not so much for the postseason as it is for regular season stuff, because some of the guidelines that we've sent out and some of the recommendations that we've sent out is to break up those larger tournaments and make them smaller tournaments. Well, when you take 2 16-team tournaments and make them 4 tournaments, the amount of officials to cover that is going to be a challenge. So I think that there's going to be plenty of work for people to get out there. We are going to continue. I don't know if you saw Todd Parr. He officially changed his name, went to the courthouse and everything, changed it to Nolan. And he's still going to help me with mat notes as we send out interpretations throughout the year. And we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Just to give you an update of where we are where we're at with the NSAA. Back in March, we were full-fledged, had a fantastic wrestling tournament, set an attendance record, had really good attendance at our girls basketball championship, and then things went kind of south at our boys championship. And by the end of the weekend, we were the only state in the nation that had anything going on. We followed that up with canceling we canceled everything from the NSAA standpoint as far as spring sports. It stunk. It sucked for everybody, including us. And as you know, things change on a monthly, weekly, and sometimes daily basis. And we are taking the stance that as long as we're allowed, we're going to continue with our activities. We feel that schools have the ability to provide a safe opportunity for our kids to participate. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be packed house gyms, and that might be, easier on you. But that being said, as you know, people are a little more on edge. Things are a little tense at times. So I'm asking that you, and I'm going to ask the same thing of our coaches the other way. You got to have thick skin, because some people are going to be a little more antsy at times. Hopefully that's not the case. I think with less people in the gym, it's going to be harder for those kind of people to hide, and that can be a good thing as well. We do have some challenges. We did all of our fall sports, and we had great success with it. We did the math after it was finished, and we completed 93% of our fall sport regular season, and even more of a percentage in the postseason. So we're on a really good clip. We finished football a couple of weeks ago, and now we have some different challenges. Indoor sports are going to be more of a challenge. It's a lot harder at times to social distance, and the nature and the closeness of wrestling puts it in the bullseye of some people with the thought that it could be detrimental. That being said, as you know, for some of you guys that have been reffing, kids have been wrestling all summer. They've been wrestling all fall. They've been playing basketball. They've been playing volleyball. They've been doing things already. We feel at the NSAA that the high schools have the best atmosphere and the best way to keep them safe, as opposed to just sending them loose with any kind of club sports. So we're going to push that way, and we're going to keep our mindset of, as long as we're allowed, we're going to continue to have activities at the high school level. Now, that doesn't mean that if things get, I'll say this, if things get shut down, it's going to be somebody above us making us shut down. So that's where we stand at the NSAA, and we're going to progress forward as long as we can. It's hard to predict, and some people are making decisions on predictions. we're not going to predict. We're going to base our decisions on facts. And as we move forward, there might be some delays. Even if we wait until after the beginning of the year, if we have to put a pause on and we come back at the beginning of the year, we're not right now planning to change any of our schedule. So even if we only have a couple of weeks of competition before that sub-district weekend, that we're going to keep the same schedule. Our facilities are the best in the state, but they're not our facilities. Where we host our championships, we don't own them. We don't own the rights to them. And being able to just change on a whim and get different dates is not as easy as people might think. So we're locked into those dates. I've been working pretty feverishly with CHI, and we have a great plan moving forward for our state championships. And as you know, I assume that you know that we have broken up our district championships to some sub-districts in classes B, C, and D. And that means we won't have the state dual championship. So there's 24 different sub-district tournaments going on one weekend. And then the next weekend, we'll have the regular 16 different district tournaments across the state. And we'll need some officials for that. The application for a postseason officiating is open on your login, and you can get on there and put your availability. And we're going to start looking at that right away, because we have to really have a plan in place, because it's going to be a challenge logistically to get some of that stuff done. Now, that being said, we want to, as officials, and I want to relay to you the mindset that we've given to all of our officials, regardless of your viewpoint of what's going on, and particularly with masks. I think it's a small price to pay, and really, we are trying to do everything we can to continue with activities, which means we're asking the officials to have a few protocols to follow, and we have put these out to our schools. And if you haven't seen that, then that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this meeting. The protocols that we are going to ask that officials do are wearing a mask when you arrive at the facility, and have it on anytime that you're not actively officiating. So if you have a mask and you want to wear it, actually, if you want to wear it while you officiate, there's no regulations that say you can't. But we're asking that you do that upon arrival of your site. And then when you're finished officiating, put it back on as you leave. And if you're in a rotation, we ask that maybe you keep that with you and put it on if you're not able to social distance, and keep that on when you're not officiating. I think more of us are getting used to that, and more of us are getting used to just wearing a mask in general. So that's one of the things that we're asking. As far as where you put your whistle, that can be underneath your mask. It muffles it a little bit, but you can cut a hole in the mask. I've seen some of those. I've seen some masks that allows you a little more room underneath, and it sticks out a little bit more if you wanted to hold your whistle out there. With wrestling, I shared a lot of those considerations that we have for officials, and let me see if I can get to it here. We're going to ask that you keep your distance as much as possible, which means when you're talking about technique of wrestling officiating, you're probably going to be a little further back from the action than you typically are, unless you need to get down there and be really, really close with regard to, back points and so forth. You can keep your distance at a pretty, I don't think that's that difficult to do. So we're asking you to be conscious of that. And as you progress through the year, we'll continue to communicate with you on any changes that might come. The other thing that we ask is, within the considerations, we're asking that you don't shake hands with the wrestlers, that you don't shake hands with the coaches. There's going to be, we ask that the host school provide hand sanitizers at every table. You could probably carry some on your own in your own bag. Some of the suggestions were that you take mouthwash and clean your whistle at times with mouthwash. Use hand sanitizer frequently. Carry your own if you wish. With regard to wrestling specifically, when you're flipping the disc, just flip it, catch it, show the color, move on from there. Just don't let the disc hit the ground. That, if it does, it does. It's not catastrophic. But at the end, we're asking that officials don't raise the hand of the winner. You're just going to point to the winner. And then we ask that the official be the one responsible for going over to the table and clarifying and making sure that the right winner is selected on the track wrestling. Now, some schools all schools are different. They get to create their own protocols. Some schools are not allowing any wrestlers to take showers at their school. I would suggest, if you have a contract with the school, that you contact them ahead of time so that you are aware of where you want to go. I'm pretty positive that most of them will give you dressing facilities, and you can do that there. Maybe they won't, but the communication is the key. If you can communicate with them and let them know, or ask them specifically if that's what you need to do, be dressed when you come. You might understand that some of them are not going to be make it available, so you're going to have to deal with it as it comes. The carpooling, and I have a list here that we're going through. Carpooling, and I don't know how much this happens. It happens a lot more in football. Crews will travel together and go to sites. Sometimes basketball officials will travel together. We ask that you do that. If you do that, that you be cognizant of maybe wearing a mask while you drive. And the reason that I say that is because of our shortage of officials and the need for everybody to be working. The last thing we want is a whole car full of guys, on Thursday going somewhere, and then a whole different car of guys on Saturday going somewhere, and one person that's within both of those cars test positive, and there's going to be some contact tracing based on from the health departments, and then right then and there we could have 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 officials out with a couple of different instances. So we're asking politely that you be cognizant of that if you do carpool, and maybe you choose not to, and that's fine as well. But if you're going to do that, be cognizant of it and do whatever we can to keep the season rolling. The winter guidelines are available on our website. If there's anybody that did not receive those considerations, well, you know what? I'll cut the officials part of it out, and I'll send that in an email right after this Zoom meeting, so you have anything that we've talked about. And this list that I have is a collaboration of 7 different state association directors from the Midwest, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, so forth. And we've put these things, and anything that we can think of that might be something that you could utilize is on there. None of it is mandatory, other than we ask that the mask be something that you do when you're indoors. And in fact, that's what we are mandating from all of our schools when we have fans that are in the facility that are not participants. They have to wear masks. Now, officials are considered participants because you're actively involved in the competitions, and we are not requiring you to do that when you are physically officiating. But arriving and leaving and so forth, we ask that you wear those. Now, and it's nothing new. It's something that the governor says every time in his press conference, some self-screening that needs to go on before. If you have a fever or you don't feel well, don't risk it. It's not worth knocking 2 or 3 other people out if in fact it comes back that you have tested positive. I don't foresee, we've got through the fall just fine. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on what some of that stuff was that we talked about to our officials in the fall as well. I'm gonna look at my, I'm gonna open this up to questions in a few minutes, but one of the other things that I wanted to go over was, and I had a couple of questions about this. You might have seen it, you might not have remember it, but 2 years ago, we changed the classification system for officials. And instead of having a registered, approved, and certified, we now only have 2 classes. If you register with us and pass the test and watch the rules meeting, then you're considered an approved official. Anybody that wants to be certified, needs to take the Part 2 test. It used to be every 5 years. If you want to be certified, if that's your goal, then take the Part 2 test on a yearly basis. Now, the Part 1 test is an open book test that you can take, and there's no time limit on it. But the Part 2 test is a 1 hour timed test. You can use your book if you want, but it is a time test, so you're going to have to whiz through it a lot faster than you do the open book test. If you do that and pass with a 70, then your classification will automatically change in the system, and you'll be a certified official. Now, in wrestling, certified officials, it's not a mandatory thing to officiate the postseason. I think it's a really good thing to do if your goal and if your aspirations, and if you are already at the state championship level, then that's something that you should probably think about doing every year. It's not too terribly difficult. It doesn't take that much time. Our dates for the Part 2 test are December 9th through the 14th, and those dates are set by the federation. And if you choose not to, it's not catastrophic, and no longer will, if after 5 years passed and you haven't taken it, no longer will you have to have that sit out period. So if your goal is just to officiate some varsity competitions and all you want to do is be an approved official, then all you have to do is register with us, watch the rules meeting, and pass the test. And that passing you had with the open book test needs to be an 80. As I stated, we have a significant number of changes to our postseason, and we are planning, and it takes, we're basically starting from scratch in our championships as far as the individual. Again, we don't have the state duels this year, but we do have almost 4 separate tournaments that are going to go on at the end of the year. And it's going to be 4 full days of wrestling. So the opportunities that we typically have for duels and getting a lot of people in the postseason for state championships is going to go down this year, unfortunately. But at the same time, we're going to do the best we can to get people that belong there, and we're going to do our best to get the best guys officiating at the end. We will have observers coming out during the year, viewing people, and our goal, just so you know, with our officials observers, is we're going to really concentrate on some of the younger officials, and I'm going to turn this over to Todd here right fast, because I'm going to let him give a little update on kind of our goals as observers and what they're looking to do. And what we have been looking to do for the last several years is trying to build our inventory. But I'll let Todd talk a little bit about that. Todd, you got to turn your speaker off, or turn your mic on.
Now?
Yep.
Sorry. Well, as far as the observers coming out, we are going to focus again on the younger officials, trying to promote their development and so forth. If you're a senior official and you do want to be observed, just basically send either myself or Ron an email or a text, and we're happy to get you on the list. Some of the things that we're going to focus on this year is hand signals. One of the things we noticed last year at the state tournament was that some of our officials were freelancing on their hand signals, and our goal with the observers is to promote the same thing from Chadron all the way to Nebraska City, which is opposite ends of the state, and just promoting that unified look, so that we're all officiating similar in style. So the hand signals, if you could focus on that would be something I would recommend. There's been a lot of activity with contracts. I see a lot of the emails where the ADs are looking for officials, and I know that the different organizations do it differently. As far as like in Omaha, I know that you are told where you're going to be going, and out west in the Northeast and so forth, it's more of a open market type thing. But if you're looking for contracts and you're trying to find opportunities, feel free to call me or email me, and I'm happy to talk to you about ideas and suggestions to help you find more opportunities. One of the things I tell everybody, not necessarily in the metro area because it doesn't really work this way there, but if you're, Lincoln West, you might want to consider emailing the athletic directors, letting them know what your credentials are and what your hopes and as far as your opportunities, see what they have. So those are just some simple ideas. But if you want to talk in more detail, I certainly would happy to share my thoughts and finding ways to help you with that. Our goals for the observers when they go out to work with the young officials is to promote their growth as officials and to see if maybe they're ready for postseason work. And so be open-minded when your observers come to talk to you. We've asked them to video you while you're officiating. That's one of the things that we're promoting this year so that we can show you video while you're officiating to help. It's just another way of learning, audio and visual, two different types of learning. So hopefully they're going to be doing that for you. Some of them have indicated that they would even be willing to email you the video after you're done if you'd like to go home and watch it for, if just something you want to do. I mean, there'll be short clips, maybe 5 minutes or less. But in those 5 minutes, you'll be able to look at your spacing and your hand signals and, all the things in that regard. So, Ron, one of the things I thought maybe we'd talk about is you had mentioned earlier today about the app that we're waiting on for the book.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
So on Monday, we sent a list to the National Federation of all of our registered officials. There are a couple of guys that I've spoken with and worked with over the last 2 days that weren't on that original list, and I'll get those names to the NFHS. If you've had the app before, you should be able to now hopefully open it, and it should be the updated version of the book. If you haven't, hopefully you received an email from the National Federation. According to our officials supervisor, he said that he checked with a couple of his basketball observers, and they did in fact receive an email and or open the app and it updated. So the rules book is supposed to be free to you on the app. The case book, however, is a charge. If you want the case book as an app on the app as well, then that's something that I believe the cost is $6.99 for that. But you should have already had the ability to do that. And if you haven't, play around with it and see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, let me know and we'll get you in contact with who does it. We don't have control of it. That comes straight from the National Federation. So I can get you in contact with the right people if that's the case. There's a couple of things on the list here that I definitely wanted to make sure that you're aware of with the new rule change. And we went over this specifically. Officials are not necessarily required to do weigh-ins now. They can do that with the school administrator present. So teams can weigh each other in, coaches can weigh the other teams in, and we're going to weigh them in by teams. So if you weigh them in by teams, the other coaches can do the work. We ask that somebody else performs the skin checks if they're not going to have an official there to do weigh-ins. And that somebody needs to be somebody qualified to do that. The other thing, if you want to wear gloves, you're more than welcome to wear gloves while you officiate. That's no problem whatsoever. And the last thing that's on my list that I wanted to make sure that you are aware of is we don't have any expectations. In fact, we don't want to put the responsibility on the officials that you have to pay attention to any of the requirements as far as COVID, like the masks. We're not asking you to make sure that the coaches are wearing masks, that the spectators are wearing masks, that the table workers, that's not your job. Your jobs are the playing rules within the sport of wrestling and to administer. So none of that part of it has changed for you. We're not going to add additional duties to you. That's the job of the school administration of the host school. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that and that everybody understood that that's not expected of you.
Ron, I have a quick question on that. So I've been doing middle school, and I had a coach, like, he'll wear it off the mat. The second he's in the corner, he takes the mask off and coaches in the corner without his mask on. We're just supposed to ignore that.
Here's what I would do, Bryce. The requirement from the NSAA, and that's not something that is because they're considered participants according to the governor's DHM. We're asking them to do it, but it's not going to be a requirement. Any fans that come into the facility, anybody that's not considered participants, are required to have masks. Now, the capacity limitations for each school are also going to be that's a responsibility of the school to make sure that that's taken care of. You're probably going to see one of two things. Number one, all the wrestlers are going to be in a different area, a different gym, commons area or something. And so they'll only allow those kids to come in when their name is on the board for the call to mat system. That is one of the only ways that they're going to be able to have fans in the stands, because unlike basketball, where the basketball players are on the court at all times, they don't have to be counted in capacity. However, when wrestlers aren't wrestling, where are they at? They're in the stands, they're in the bleachers, and that would make them have to be counted in the capacity. So if they have that and the wrestlers are in the stands, my guess is that they're not going to have very many other fans in there. So there's and the schools have the autonomy to make those decisions. As far as your question, Bryce, unless you're concerned about it personally yourself, if you are, then I would go to the school administrator or whoever's in charge of the tournament and ask them to look into it.
So just to clarify, you're saying that the coaches are considered participants and they don't have to wear it when they're coaching? Like,
oh, I'm going to double check and make sure that's right, but that's
okay.
my understanding, yes.
Okay, I think we should clarify that, because, I mean, I think coaches, 99% of coaches were wearing it, this one coach, and it was like other coaches were like, well, why doesn't he have to wear it?
Yeah.
I didn't have an answer for him.
And at the junior high level, and I think that some of that is based on the governor's DHM instead of our recommendations. And so I'll double check and I'll make sure that I get that right and get it. And I'll do that. I'll try to do that tonight. I'll try to do that.
I'm not trying to be the mask police. I know that coaches want it to be fair.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I have a couple of questions on here. Clarification.
Hey, I have a question.
Go ahead, Taylor.
Boys Town, they sent out their regulations for their tournament, and they're requiring every coach to wear a mask no matter what. So I think it's also going to go by the host of the tournament if they want to make their coaches wear a mask. Am I correct on that or not?
Yes,
or is
they
Boys
can
Town
be
just doing their own thing.
No, and they can do that. They can do that. And sometimes it's based on where they live and what the health department has recommended to them. And to be quite honest with you, I think that is a wise choice for coaches to wear a mask. Maybe they pull it down to yell a little bit and then pull it back up. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but we'll make sure that you're right. Schools can make their own decisions and they can be more restrictive than us, but they just can't be less restrictive than us. I have a couple of questions in the chat that I'm going to answer, and then I'll open it up again. Is there a clarification on the legal uniform for weigh-ins? The legal uniform for weigh-ins doesn't have to be the uniform that they necessarily wrestle in, because there's companies now that are making super lightweight uniform. They meet the requirements as far as length and everything, but they're really, really light, and it might not be the same competition uniform that they utilize or use during that competition, but they can weigh in it, and it does have to meet the regulations of a uniform. And our wrestlers allowed to compete with the mask on. And although the NFHS rules don't address it specifically, and we have asked the NFHS for clarification, the answer is yes, you can allow them to wear a mask. And from my understanding, there's a lot of junior highs that are doing it, and with the mandatory wearing of a headgear, it keeps the mask on pretty good. So they're able to do that. Our sports medicine advisory committee said that they didn't want us to recommend that. There's not enough evidence to show that it's not detrimental. But there's not enough evidence showing that it is. So they just said, leave it as a personal decision. Some schools are not allowing their kids to participate unless they wear a mask. So you'll see some, and they're the ones that come all the way over the head and have just an opening for the ski goggles, but they come up over the face. Those are some of the ones that I've been sent that people want to use, and those are okay. If you have any questions about some of that stuff, here's our stance. Let them compete in it. It doesn't give them a competitive advantage in any way. And if you have questions about it, take a picture of it, send it to me, send it to Todd, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can, whether it's legal or not legal. But we're allowing face masks for sure. Criteria for how often the mats get cleaned. Obviously we clean mats, and that's one of the things about wrestling is we are already used to cleaning significantly more than every other sport. My guess is we're going to have a lot less skin disease this year because of all the cleaning that we're doing. We ask that the schools clean between each session, not between each match, but it doesn't mean that they can't. There's the foggers that they have are quick drying foggers, and sometimes they'll get it when they have a small break in the action. They'll shoot a mat and get it. That's what some of these larger competitions have been doing. But we are not requiring them to clean between every match. We do ask that they clean between sessions, before it starts, after warm-ups, and so forth. But we don't specifically say like every match. Each school that hosts can also require officials to wear a mask too. We haven't had that yet that I'm aware of, that they're asking the officials to wear a mask. A lot of the volleyball officials wore masks because they're not breathing hard. They don't do a lot of action. And if you're getting old and decrepit, maybe you should look into volleyball officiating because it's really easy. Just kidding. But when your heart rate is up, that's one of the concerns that our sports medicine advisory committee had, is the CO2 rebreathing and some of the cardiac issues that are potential risks if you're wearing a mask and making it more difficult to breathe, or if you have any kind of breathing conditions to start with. We don't want to exacerbate that. We don't want to make those worse than they already are. And schools can require it. I guess I haven't heard that they are, but and if that's going to be an issue, if you're assigned to a school and they're requiring it, let me know. If that's something that's going to be a problem for you, let me know, and then I'll have a conversation with the school. And sometimes the people that are making these decisions just need to be educated on, because in their mind, you're just standing in the middle of the mat calling points. Well, that's not at all what happens. And so we'll have to educate them, and I'll make that call and talk to them for them. Okay. The link, the coaches must wear masks at all times. That's probably right. That has changed. And to be quite honest with you, sometimes I get confused because we change sometimes day to day. That sounds like it's probably correct though. The latest thing that we sent out is coaches should wear masks at all times. And if that's the case, guys, then I'll make sure that I communicate to the coaches so that you don't have to be the one that has to address it. We'll make sure that they know that. And I truly believe, I've been all across the state in the last several months, and it depending on where you're at, sometimes mask wearing is pretty common, and sometimes it's not. Some people look at you like you're crazy when you're wearing it, but regardless of your view of it, we're asking that you do that for us to keep things rolling. If the wrestler's mask comes off, how do you call it? That's going to be equipment. If it comes off, you give him, it's like the headgear coming off. You're going to give them a chance to fix it. Hopefully it won't pose that much of a problem and we won't have too much of an issue. If we need to address it later on and call it differently, then we will. But at this time, we're going to call that like an equipment timeout and give them an opportunity to fix it. Just like if their headgear came unsnapped or broken, we're gonna give them a chance to fix it. Does a coach need to have a mask at the conversation at the table? The answer to that is absolutely yes. And I wouldn't, if I were you, if you're going to have a conversation with the coach, have them go to the table. You can keep your distance, the definition of close contact is close contact with somebody without a mask for 15 minutes or more. My guess is with the coaches' conversations at the table, you're not going to hopefully spend 15 minutes with any particular coach at the table. So hopefully that's not going to be an issue. Any other questions, if you type it into chat, because I'm sure that anybody else, or if you want to, if you have a question that you want to ask verbally, let me know that as well.
Can you address the head neck time thing?
Yeah,
first?
yeah. And you win, Bryce, just so you know. And
Oh, I knew it all along. I was just making sure he knew.
and I verified with all the surrounding states, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, and all of us that any of you guys that travel out of state to do any competitions, they're all going to be calling it the same. This is what the National Federation sent to us. I'll give you an example of what we went over today. If you have an injury, two kids or one kid butts it, hits his head on the floor or hits hard on the mat, there's not an appropriate healthcare official readily available. Maybe they're at the facility, but they're not right there. You will start the injury time and say injury time goes for 30 seconds. An appropriate healthcare professional shows up at that time and requests the head, neck, cervical time. So there's 30 seconds gone. And the way the rule reads, from that point on, you extend that time to a total of 5 minutes. So from that time that they requested, there's only 4 minutes and 30 seconds left of head, neck, cervical time. However, that 30 seconds is still counted on the injury time as well. So it's kind of, I don't necessarily like the interpretation, but that is the interpretation. And that's what we've been told. We've been ordered to make that interpretation and make that call that way. I believe, and Colin showed us, I think that once you push head, neck, cervical, it will continue up to 5 minutes. That 30 seconds will be still logged under that wrestler's 90 seconds of injury time. If he has a second injury that's head, neck, cervical, then it doesn't matter about the time. The match will be a default. If the second injury is not head, neck, cervical, then it is the second time out. They'll have the remaining 1 minute left if there was 30 seconds gone to evaluate and determine whether they can continue. Now that is the second timeout, even though the head, neck, cervical time is different. That is actually the second timeout, and upon restart, the other wrestler will have their choice. Is that it? Did that explain it the way you thought, Bryce?
Yeah. I have a question on if, let's say, they show up without their mouthpiece, technical violation, start injury time. They go, takes them a minute, they come back. So they've used a minute of their injury time. The next, they get dumped on their head, takes 30 seconds. Well, let's say it takes 15 seconds. The doctor says, hey, I need head, neck time. So have they used a minute 15 or have they used 15 and they have 3:45 or do they have 4:45? That makes sense? Because it's the second injury time that's the head and neck, not the first.
Correct. All right. So I think I understand. So the second time that you start the injury time, there's 15 seconds elapsed. Then they add for head and neck.
Yep.
You would have 4 minutes and 45 seconds left.
Okay, that's the way I understood it too. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Hey, Ron.
Yeah.
Does track know this, or do we have to figure it out?
No, they have a head, neck, cervical button that they can push. The only thing that I would say, and I believe Colin addressed it last time we met, if there is some time on the very first one that they should go to the injury time, then just double check. If they're you have potentially 5 minutes to just walk over there and say, hey, just jot down, make sure that they have this injury time is logged on their injury time. So
in general, the computer should be programmed to do these calculations, though.
that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, does the computer know that you use 30 seconds and they only use 4:40, or you got to stop it at 4:40? If you use 30 seconds at 4:30, you just got to know that there's 30 seconds left. That's when it's cut off for the cervical time, right?
It's my understanding that the cervical time will take off where you start. It's because it's an extension and that's the way it was always worded. It's my understanding that the track wrestling time will start at that point and go to 5 minutes. So like if you
Okay.
start 30 seconds and then injury, because if injury time is going, as soon as you push head, neck, cervical, injury time will stop. It should be logged. And then that clock, you won't really see a change in the clock. It'll just extend to 5 minutes. But it should start at that, whenever you put whenever you push that button, it should start at that point and get 5 minutes, a 5 minute total. And the extension is to extend to 5 minutes.
Okay.
The when head and assistant official need to maintain 6 foot, again, if you're not wearing masks, probably have your conversations. It's going to be a little bit more difficult, but you can also cover your face, get a little closer. Sometimes you like to cover your mouth anyway. If you don't have a mask, or if you have one readily available, you can throw it on to have the conversation.
Hey, what about could the assistant ref just wear his mask and then you could get up close?
Sure. We're not going to mandate it, but that could be a case. Absolutely. Guy asked if there's any thought about home weigh-ins. Yeah, we checked into home weigh-ins. The National Federation is pretty adamantly against that. They have been from the very beginning of the weight management program. And now even Kansas doesn't allow home weigh-ins. So Kansas, anybody from Kansas, they're in the dark ages over there.
Well, I can tell you from experience, I don't think it ever worked right.
Yeah.
Like
And-
guys make weight all year and then not make weight at state because they hadn't made it all year. So.
Right. So the answer to that is no, and primarily because we're 100% state. We follow the rules. The NFHS puts out 100% in every one of our sports. And the penalty for not following that is not having representation on the rules committee. And I go back on the rules committee this next coming year. So if we did that, I wouldn't be able to serve on the rules committee, and we don't want that either. But we have checked into it. We asked that specifically, and they were adamantly against it. Logos on the mask. We're going to treat this like headgear. Right now, there's no stipulations on the mask as long as it's not offensive. And even if it is offensive, we had this discussion today with our other directors. Even if you feel that it's somewhat offensive, let them compete, take a picture, let me know, and then we'll address it, because I don't want that to be something that you have to deal with. My thought is, I don't think we're going to have a problem with that. Logos and whatever, they don't have to be the same color. They don't have to, they can be multicolored. It doesn't really matter. It does have to be a single solid material, meaning it can't be a mesh or something that's abrasive. That's within the rule books, that it's like a hairnet. You can't have something that's hard and abrasive. So that we'll treat that way. If you have any issues with it, again, let us know, but let them compete. If that's the only mask they have, and if you want to say something to the coach, you're more than welcome to, but we would let them compete, take a picture, send it to me, and then we'll deal with it administratively with the school. Any other questions?
I saw a question up there that I don't know if it got answered. If a wrestler is wearing a mask and it comes off, do we just let him keep wrestling?
Yeah, we're going to treat that like equipment. Like if the hairnet came off, or the hair cover came off, or the headgear came off, stop the match, allow them to clean, allow them to put it back on, and then start the match again. So yeah, we're going to treat that like equipment.
I seen someone put on there about weigh-ins with a mask. If they're over, can they take the mask off?
No, and that goes the same for wearing socks. They can wear low-cut socks for weigh-ins, but if they step on the scale with socks and they don't make weight, they can't step off the scale and take off their socks and step back on. Whatever they step on with the very first time is mandatory for them to use that for the weigh-in.
Are they
So-
required to wear masks at weigh-ins while
Yes.
they weigh in?
Yes. Yes. And they'll be doing temperature checks as well. They'll be doing it depends on when they want to do it. We're asking them that they do that as the people come in the facility or whatever. And I'll be honest with you, there's not going to be any COVID police out there if they're not doing these protocols. It's going to be, unless somebody rats them out and calls us. And again, all we're going to do is contact the school and say, hey, you've agreed to do this. We're doing everything we can to keep these activities going. And be quite honest, we haven't had any issues with the kids. Where we have issues is with the fans and parents and people that have a strong belief against it for whatever reason. Those are the issues that the administrators are dealing with. We've had little to no issues with kids. Most of them are wearing it at school. They're used to it. And that's just, it's kind of a norm for them now. So it's not that big of an issue.
Hey, Ron, can you hear me?
Yes.
One other thing, when they check into the table, do you want them to have their mask on? And then are we going to allow them to put the headgear on after that?
No, if they come to the mat, they should come to the mat prepared to wrestle. If they don't want to wear a mask, then they don't need to have a mask on when they do it. When they come off the mat and they go to wherever they're going and they're done wrestling, we ask that they put their mask on. I can foresee that being something that they don't do immediately. They're tired and walking off the mat. They might not do it right away, but my guess is that the host facility is going to be on them about doing that. So they're going to be the ones that take care of it. Again, we don't want our officials to be in charge of that. And if they come to the mat ready to wrestle, they won't obviously have a mask on most of the time.
Hey, Ron, as far as when you're doing weigh-ins and the skin checks and all that, and those kids are wearing a mask, we can't see what's underneath that mask.
Right.
So they come to the mat to wrestle and we see, they've got spotted ringworm or something like that on their chin. How do you want us to approach it that way?
Well, somebody asked that question down here. Are you asking them to remove the mask for skin checks? I would say yes. Let's ask them to just so you can take a quick look. It doesn't have to be off for a couple of seconds and then move on. If they want to put it back on, then they put it back on. The mask, majority of the masks are not going to make a difference on the weigh-ins. Stepping on and being over and taking your mask off, my guess is not going to change by even a 1/10. So I don't know that that's going to be an issue, but yes, Ray, if you want to check their face, then I think that's a good call. Now remember, with weigh-ins and the new hair rule, there is not a length requirement for hair. So they can have a moppy hairdo that hangs all the way down to their shoulders and it doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. So we don't have to worry about that, which I think is a good thing. The facial hair, however, is still a rule. If they have facial hair that's not just a mustache, then they need to have a mask, like a full competition mask that's made for wrestling.
So the face mask, the COVID face mask doesn't count as the cover for the beard, right?
That is correct. That is correct. It has to be. That's a good point, Guy. No, that would not count to cover for facial hair. And we don't know right now how easily they're going to stay on. So we're hoping that if it does, then that's great. But if they have facial hair, then that has to be covered by a mask that's attached to the headgear and made for that specific purpose. And not necessarily the facial hair, but a face mask that's made for wrestling. Dropping signers for skin checks. What does that mean? Not dropping signers for skin checks. I don't understand the question. Is that Leonard?
Like where they would have to take their singlet down for a skin check?
No, you don't take the singlet down. You don't take your straps down at all. You treat it the same as if they're wearing a compression shirt. You're not going to ask them to take the compression shirt on. And the rationale behind that is more of equality and making sure that girls and guys can weigh in the same area. Now, we've instructed our schools to find a better area to weigh in than a really, really tight locker room where everybody's crowded together. The fact that everybody has to weigh in a competition singlet allows a lot of possibilities for them to do weigh-ins elsewhere, even if it's on the competition mats. So you can line up a school. You could have 3 schools lined up because they're wrestling each other, they're traveling with each other, and so forth. So them being social distance is not that much of an issue. We don't ask that they do that. However, if you can social distance teams during weigh-in, you can get 3 teams per mat easily and keep social distance, and then weigh them in by teams. Probably going to have more schools having more scales and doing it that way, but we're allowing them. In fact, that's what part of the rule changes for this year. They can weigh in as a team as opposed to just individually. Chin cup, no. A chin cup, and Todd, I don't believe a chin cup covers the requirement of covering facial hair. Am I right?
No,
David.
you can have a chin cup on your mat, your headgear, but it doesn't, still got to shave.
Right. Is there a suitable undergarment for weigh-ins? That's part of the rule changes too. It's more of an emphasis. They do have to have a suitable undergarment underneath the competition uniform. If it's tight enough and you can tell that it's not, I would address that with the coach. You don't necessarily have to address that with the wrestler. But yes, that's part of the rule. They do need a suitable undergarment underneath their competition uniform, which means they need to be wearing that at weigh-ins also, not just competition. They need to be wearing a suitable undergarment. And that suitable undergarment should completely cover the butt, the crotch, and if it's a girl, the breasts. Hopefully I've answered everybody's questions that you might have with regard to the COVID protocols and some of the things that we're asking you to do. Again, we can't thank you enough for what you do. We're going to try to be rolling through the season the best we can. There's probably, my guess is, in fact, I think it's starting to happen already. There's a couple of quarantine schools that are not going to be able to compete. If that quarantine school is a host school, you could see some canceled competitions. We ask that you be flexible and work with your schools and try to do the best you can, because there's going to be a lot of pop-up competitions. The schedules are not completely set. They don't have to turn in their schedules to the NSAA this year. We're giving them the flexibility to make changes during the season to competitions. So if they lose a couple of weeks here and there of competitions they're supposed to go to, they're not stuck with nothing. They can find something to go to and try to have a competition. My other guess is you're going to see a lot more dual meets for the schools that can field out full teams. They're going to do a lot more dual meets than tournaments. The smaller schools that have, 3 or 4 or 5 guys on a team, obviously that's not a great dual team and they don't participate in duels near as much. Those will continue to be tournament teams and tournament people that are or teams that are participating in tournaments. And that's by design. We did that on purpose. It's one of the reasons we didn't wait to the requirement of going to all duels. We have, probably half of our schools can't field a dual team. So we wanted to make sure that they had the opportunity to compete. All right. I think I've covered everything. Is there any other questions while we're here? All right. This is recorded. I'll make this available on our website by tomorrow. And if you have any other questions that we didn't address tonight, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and everybody is understanding of our expectations and what everybody else is doing so that we can all do it the same. All right. If nothing else, I want to thank everybody again, and you guys have a great night.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks, sir.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.